Hello, everybody. Welcome. Well done for getting a ticket. They went in under a minute this time, which is a bit ridiculous, I know. I do apologise for that. I'm not sure what else we can do about it. Next month, the meetup's going to be at Skills Matter, and then we're back here at Facebook in March. But for the Skills Matter meetup next month, you need to register with Skills Matter in order to go, so don't forget to do that. And I think it's likely to be the 29th, but I'm not sure exactly because there's tube strikes and all sorts of things, so we're trying to sort that out now. Yeah, welcome. Big thanks to the speakers tonight. We've got 4 great speakers. As you can see, they're pretty excellent talks, and I'm really looking forward to them. We're going to have a break between the second and third one. Big thanks to Facebook for hosting us tonight, and also to Dale, who's been doing our audio-visual stuff for the last year or so. He's moving on, so thank you very much, Dale, for everything you've done. If anybody wants to give a talk at upcoming meetups, then see Amy wherever she is, just there. Great. Okay, so first talk, Yanni is going to be talking about building things with React Native. Go for it.
Mic check, mic check. Cool. Hi, everybody. So my name is Yanni, and I am a web developer at a company called Futurist. I don't really, if somebody asked me what I do, I would say many things. I could be a web guy or something, but I'm definitely not a mobile developer. And last summer, I found myself in this interesting situation where we had a really interesting case that we could do, a customer that really wanted to work with us, but we didn't have any iOS developers available. And so we talked with the customer, how we can, get to work together given this constraint. And what we decided to do is that we decided to prototype their app with React Native, mostly to just test the kind of business assumptions that they had about their business and the app, but also to test the technology, React Native, and how it actually works in the real world. And so now, for the past 8 months, I've been building React Native apps day to day at Futurist, and I wanted to come here and talk about the experience briefly. So it's been a little less than a year that Facebook open sourced React Native for iOS, and there's been really a lot of community interest. I think because frustration that a lot of developers feel about wanting to actually develop really good quality experiences for mobile, but the learning curve to learn to develop for iOS or Android is really steep. And the same frustration is felt by a lot of companies that want to hire native developers. Because, trust me, if you try to hire native developers in this town, they're actually a lot harder to find than web generalists and full stack devs. So the community response is really excited, 25,000 stars, 500 contributors in 9 months. But almost a year on, we're only now starting to see actual, real experiences of people building production quality apps on React Native outside Facebook online. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about here, just my actual experiences and not so much into technical detail. So I'm kind of assuming that everybody here knows more or less what React Native is. And if you're more interested about technical details, please do read them on the internet. I will tweet links afterwards. But let's talk about my experiences. And the way I wanted to look at this is what would have I wanted to know before I started building my first React Native app? Questions like, does it actually perform well? Is it reliable enough for production? What is the developer experience like, really? What kind of apps is React Native actually good for, and what kinds not? And can I, as a web developer, build apps without prior experience as a mobile dev? And there's a bunch of other questions as well, but let's jump right in. So one of the big questions was, does it feel native? So I've had some bad experiences building hybrid mobile applications with things like PhoneGap. And I wasn't really sure if React Native would be all that different, maybe because I didn't understand the technology at that point fundamentally. And the question, what actually does it mean for something to feel native? Because you can make a hybrid web app that looks native as long as it's still, in screenshots, it can look perfectly native. But it's the interactions and the animations and the performance that really make the native experience that a lot of companies choose to spend a lot of money for developing native applications for different platforms. And the answer is that as long as you know the platform guidelines, for iOS, you know the human interaction guidelines, and you know for Android the material design guidelines, you can actually build fully native experiences on React Native because the app is fundamentally native. But don't take it just from my word. Let's look at some examples of the apps that we have built. So on the left is the first app that we built. It's now live on App Store for iOS. I'm not going to mention the name yet. because the company is still setting up operations. But all the views here are pure JavaScript. We're using alt.js as a kind of Flux container, and all the views are just pure React views. The look here is not like a standard iOS look, but that's just a design choice. It's not limited by the platform in any way. And you've seen some, good native feeling things here. You have the bounds. The search is also, like really snappy experience that I would have a hard time doing on mobile. Those drop frames are actually in the video, not in the app. Sorry, my bad about that. So if you look at it, at least for me, this is a fully native feeling experience. And we decided to do, a little Tinder-like experience as well, because like who doesn't like little Tinder-like experiences these days? It's all the rage a few years ago. So yeah, that's what we built, and that's now in production in the App Store. The other app that we built, we're actually building right now. So this is just a sneak preview. Is another startup's mobile offering. And this is also built on React Native, and here you can just see some integrations on the native platforms, image pickers, etc. What we really paid a lot of attention to here is all the transition states, the thing that it works reliably and then the interactions are good, even in cases like poor network performance. So, I mean, you judge for yourself, but at least for me, when I use this on my handheld device, and if you want, you can come talk to me afterwards. I can show it on the phone. But to me, these actually feel very native experiences. Another question that we had, another big worry, was that does it perform well? And well, for my part, I can say that it does work well. Like most basic stuff that you throw at it runs at 60 frames per second out of the box. And that's thanks to the multi-threaded execution pipeline that actually does a lot of the heavy lifting on a background thread and doesn't block the UI. So unless you do really stupid things, it does work, and it does work very well. But we did some stupid things our first time around. So mostly the issues are that when you try to render something complex while you're transitioning from screen to screen, that's something that really kills the performance. And even a little tiny drop from that magical 60 FPS really makes it feel like the app is not perfect or it's not native. The JavaScript-based navigator is actually one of the weak points of the API, but there's a great open source project called XNavigator that we're using now in the second project, and there have been no performance issues whatsoever. Then, what maybe even bigger question was, is it reliable to be used in production? And here I can only talk about iOS. We haven't yet had experiences building production-grade React Native apps on Android. So what we do have in the app, that we have a crash reporting hooked up, and there have not been a single crash in all testing, and the minor production use there is so far before the user acquisition launch of the company starts. And in the latest production version, there's no crashes either due to our bugs or any other reason. So overall, I would say that the execution is very safe. There's no memory leaks, at least as far as we can detect, that would cause any kind of performance degradation. If crashes do happen, though, it's really nice that you have source map JavaScript stack traces in the crash dumps. We even experimented with shipping our Flux store serialized in the crash report, so we could actually just plug it back in a developer device and replicate any bug, because we know what line of code the error happens in, and we know what the state of the app is at the time, so it's kind of a piece of piss to fix any error. But one thing that I didn't maybe fully consider when we started, being not a mobile developer, is that fatal bugs in mobile are actually a really big deal. Like you can't just look at your logs and go like, oh, something's up, and then simply deploy a new version instantly. And there's no F5 for the user either. So a worst case scenario, a user has to remove your app or reinstall your app or even stop using it. And for this, on the second time around, what we decided to invest in and what I recommend also is basically quality first architecture. So using Redux, like Jonas will be talking about today, immutable JS, try to be as predictable about the programming model as possible, use ESLint with React Native add-ons, everything turned to 11, everything's an error, nothing's a warning. Use prop type declarations in all React components. All these kind of basic things that really make sure that you're not crashing in any null pointer exceptions or anything like that, which are the most common cause that we saw when we were developing. But let's look at a little bit more about the development experience, because one of the things is that I had heard about live reloading and Chrome Developer Tools debugging and all those great things, but I still wanted to basically know, would I hate my life every single day developing on React Native, being the early piece of tech that it is? And the answer is that I have really enjoyed it, but there are a few caveats. But let's look at the good parts first. So here's an example development workflow. You get to work in your favorite editor, tools, etc. The live reload is really great. Working with latest ES6 features is cool. What you see there is an error screen. So that's what happens when you do console warn. It shows you exactly what is going on in development on the app. Something happens, you get a red box of death, which is actually cool because you can just click on the line and it opens the line of code source mapped in your editor. And you can really easily fix the issue, as we do here by commenting out pointless code. And then the app runs. So I think the overall happy path for developer experience is really super good, at least for iOS for now. And you can even improve this experience using Redux. You could hook up Redux hot loading, so you can see your screen actually, instead of live reload into the initial state, it actually loads in the state that it is in, which is pretty magical, but we haven't yet put that to full work in our apps. But then the not so happy experience. So this is the experience that I had when I was trying to get that first app video done yesterday. And is that, loaded this thing after a few more weeks of not working on it. I start the app, and I get some magical Objective-C side or native side crash saying execution bad access. It took me about an hour to figure out that I actually had a newer version of the command line interface tooling installed on my computer because of a new project, and they just weren't compatible together. And it needs to be installed globally, so it's a bit of a maintenance issue. But I think the core point here is that the tools right now are moving ahead so quickly that things do break when you update. One of the bigger issues is third-party components, that they really fall behind the newest Edge version, newest released version of React Native. So there's some headaches there. But these are mainly, I would say, issues in the developer experience, and none of these translate into issues in running your app in production. So yeah, I mean, if you can deal with some amount of shit, then I think the experience is really good. I mean, when you develop on the bleeding edge, sometimes you just have to let it bleed. And I think for me, the experience has definitely been a very positive one. Then when we started to evaluate React Native in different kinds of cases, one of the things was what kind of apps can we actually build in it, and what kinds can we not build in it? And if you look at, for example, other native application cross-platform solutions like Xamarin Forms, which provides you a way of doing same UI in different platforms, it actually kind of sucks. It doesn't provide the kind of consumer-grade experience that you need to make a good app these days. But for the React Native, can you do that? So you can use React Native on iPhones, iPads, Android phones, Android tablets, I believe, as well, though I haven't experienced that. So there's no limitations on what kind of apps in terms of what kind of device. But unlike Xamarin, React Native doesn't aim to provide 100% API coverage on all the native APIs, but instead it focuses more on building a solid React-like abstraction of the most important ones. What does come up, though, in every single case, most likely, if you're trying to build a native app, is that you want to use the native APIs that are not supported out of the box. The good news for that is that the intro op is really super simple, and a lot of the use cases that are not included in React Native out of the box are already covered by third-party components in NPM, as long as they keep up with the latest version of the React Native framework. And then if you're OK with writing a little bit Objective-C or Java code to integrate the native APIs that aren't on NPM into your code, then it's actually really super simple. On the Vue level, I would say that everything is possible. You can do really ambitious, complex stuff. I'd say that Tinder Vue, even though it's a bit of a cliche, but it is, technically speaking, it was super easy to write. The animation API, the interaction API is super simple. So you can create any kinds of app experiences that you would like. That's my take on it as well. But there is a special subcategory of apps, what they call adaptive UIs or responsive UIs, that are not so simple, because they're difficult even on the native platform's tooling itself. But with the React Native, I believe that this would be actually quite difficult to do well. And now with iOS 9 split screen multitasking on iPad, it's becoming even more important to be able to support different kinds of size classes in the same app. So I would say the happy path is that for the CSS-based Flexbox layout system that you would use when developing views in React Native, if you can basically constrain to use on either tablets app or phone app, that will make the life a lot easier. And the good news is a lot of apps are built this way these days anyway. Very few native apps are actually pure universal apps that runs the same code base on both platforms. So yeah, given this constraint in mind, I would say that you can do any kind of native app, iOS app that you want to build. And then, then we get into the kind of self-confidence issues as a web developer. Can I build apps without any prior experience? And this is hard to answer with such a simple yes, because we certainly managed without any prior experience whatsoever. I mean, the first thing I had to do when I needed to unwrap a Mac out of a box because I'm a Linux user, and I needed to learn how to type a curly brace on a Finnish keyboard layout on a Mac. And it took me so long that I just didn't figure it out, and I changed to US keyboard, and then I needed to learn how to type again from scratch. So we certainly, we could get going without knowing anything, but at minimum, you have to learn a lot of stuff while doing it. The interface guidelines, which APIs to use, how to configure your app to multiple environments, how to pass an App Store review. We failed the first time, not on a technical clause, but because we didn't have a flag bad content feature in our application, and we did not read the subclause of a subclause of a subclause in the App Store review policies to know that we need to have that kind of button for user-generated content. But actually, this is what I feel is the main benefit of React Native over the other cross-platform solutions there might be, is that you can learn as you go. I like to call it just-in-time learning, basically. There would have been no chance I could have built the kind of application that we built in anywhere near the time if I had been building it in Swift or Objective-C, because honestly, to tackle that big ball of scary everything all at once would have been just too overwhelming. But as you go, you learn the things you need on demand, and that's the way we managed to get from 0 to production in a relatively short time. And I think I want to share a little, the funniest moment for me, the biggest validation that we had about can I build these kind of apps is that for the project, we had a business consultant for hire who was doing the product owner role for our customer. And she's a very experienced product owner, digital product owner, worked with a lot of app companies. And this one morning, she comes to us, and she's furious because nobody told her that none of us is an app developer. And that's just simply, apparently, not cool. But it took her months to figure out, and she was still very happy with what we were delivering. So I think that was the biggest validation that you can actually do it without any previous experience. And then, so you can develop an app in React Native without any experience, but is it a good idea? And this is something that we've been thinking about a lot at Futurice recently, is how do we sell the value proposition of this to our customers? So it basically, for many organizations, it boils down to the timeless question of coin. Is it going to be cheaper for us to build our app in this technology? Will it improve our time to market? So basically, the question is, show me the money. That's the question. And the disappointing answer, at least to our sales guys and probably many business-minded people out there, is that we can't really show the numbers yet. So not all apps and not all developers are created equal. At our company, we've created hundreds of apps, probably thousands. We have great app developers, we have great React developers, but we don't have simply a person who is equally experienced in both to be able to say how long it would take to do this in both platforms. And short of making some kind of absurd competition where we just lock like 2 teams in different rooms and they build the same app at the same time, and then the first one who gets out, with a ready app wins, it's hard to get really any actual data. But I can give some subjective stats. So the first version of the application, basically a full-featured prototype, I built alone in 5 weeks while learning React Native. We also built a Node.js backend and CMS integration in that 5 weeks, or I did. And then we grew the team to size of 2, and we started to iterate on the prototype. So it was basically me and a Scala backend developer who's never really touched any React or web front-end code anywhere. And it took us, actually like really big iterations. We built it to, I would say, like excellent quality production application and scalable backend in 10 weeks. And again, like even more subjective numbers, I would say that the direct path from spec, which we of course didn't have, to product using the app only and not the backend and the integration layer and all those things, I would say that it would take maybe another 5 weeks from one developer to build. So I would say 10 weeks from 0 to a full-featured, visually good-looking, application. So I don't know how quickly anybody here can do it in another technology, but I say I was pretty happy, and the customer was very happy, and business was very happy. So yeah, there's no money, but the question is then, what concrete benefits can we actually sell to my boss or the business owner? And I think this is a question that some of you, if you're interested in using React Native in real world, this is something that you'll be asking as well, because there are some difficulties in selling very, very early stage technology. There's always risk involved. So the way I look at it is like this. Hiring good native developers is really hard. I mean, that's why I got onto this React Native gravy train in the first place, is that we didn't have one. And with this, you can increase your hiring pool. There's a lot of hype around this technology, and a lot of good, enthusiastic developers are actually eager to work on React Native. I don't know, should we have a show of hands? Who here would like to work in React Native? That's good. I was hoping that it wouldn't be just like one guy somewhere. So yeah, so that's I think a major thing you can sell to your business. Another thing is that you can scale out your existing team and be more flexible. So if you have a product organization that has already a lot of web developers and a web product and you want to do mobile, you can use the same developers to do this. And as an individual developer, a freelancer, you can use your skills to provide more value to potential customers. So I think that's a pretty good pitch. And then there's the cross-platform thing. So React Native is not write once, run everywhere, but I believe you can still share a lot of code. So we haven't done this for production yet, but I would say that with a well-architected application, you can share up to half of the code base. And that's gonna translate to some savings. And the bigger savings come in that if you have one team building products and you don't have that communication overhead and that kind of gap, air gap between different kinds of Android developers and iOS developers and web developers, that's where the real savings come from. And then also the maintenance and change cost of one team working on multiple apps is actually got lower. So I would say that's something. And then one of the things that we actually discovered along the way, we didn't know this, is that we do this kind of lean startup-inspired development model. So we need to kind of test ideas really quickly. We want to A/B test. But App Store on iOS has a 1-week delay on your deployments. So that kind of puts a little bit of a break on it. But you can actually, with React Native, you can bypass App Store reviews for most app updates, anything that doesn't touch some of the native components. We use Microsoft Code Push to deploy directly from our CI to our users. So that's a major win when you just want to iterate super quick. So then there's the thing. This goes into the category of fear, uncertainty, doubt. What potentially could go wrong? Or in other words, can I pull this off without fucking up and getting fired? I hope that I have shown that at least most of the fears that I had when I started were unbased, or the risks at least didn't realize in our case. The user experience is great, the performance is good, the application is stable. So I believe that any reasonably experienced React developer can do the same in about the same time as I did. I didn't have any divine knowledge or ability to do these kinds of things. But I still do have a little bit of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and it's what is the future of React Native? So Facebook has invested a lot in React Native in terms of engineering resources, but then again, Facebook does have a hell of a lot of engineering resources to throw at things, so it doesn't necessarily mean that they are 100% committed. The apps that they have out in the store, Facebook Groups, Facebook Ad Manager, they're not their core apps. They can still abandon this technology. And for this reason, I'm a little bit hesitant to recommend React Native to all cases. I believe that it's okay for anything where technological experimentation is an affordance. You could do startup apps, any kind of non-digital businesses, digital presence apps, prototypes, minimum viable products, anything that has either a limited lifetime or a limited exit point for reevaluation down the line in a year or two if this whole train goes south. But yeah, for multi-million, big team, mission-critical apps, we still hesitate to recommend this to our customers because there is still some risk involved. And you might ask, but it's open source, right? So why do we care about Facebook's participation in this? And yeah, it's open source, but the mainstream adoption is not yet strong enough to guarantee that there will be a future in this. And that's kind of like my covert mission here today, is that I don't work for Facebook. I have no reason to be selling this piece of technology to anybody. In a way, if I would just keep this to myself, I would be a lot more special snowflake, and you guys you guys couldn't catch up with me. But there's one reason, though, is that I believe that React Native is actually an exceptional piece of technology, and it could be the short to medium-term future of mobile development, either on one platform or on multiple platforms. And I never really wanted to be a mobile developer because I didn't want to lock myself into this vendor, single vendor kind of situation where I learn a whole lot of proprietary knowledge and then have it taken away or become irrelevant. I want to break silos instead of building them, and I think this is kind of what React Native can do. So the stronger the community, the stronger the future of this technology, and that's why I wanted to talk here today. Thank you for listening to me. You can ask questions if there's time, or you can ask questions at break, or if you go to a pub, you can ask questions. You can follow me on Twitter. The name is right there on the screen. I will put these slides up tomorrow, and I will post links to other resources that go into more detail about this stuff. There's also a blog series coming on our Company Futures blog. I will tweet those out when they start coming in a couple of weeks. And then Stu is probably going to hate me for this, but if you want to work on React or React Native, come work for Futurice. We're a digital consultancy. We're actually a great company to work for, and we have a really big commitment to future technology like React Native. And that is not all. If you want any help building your React Native apps, we can also help you with that. Oh, and that's not all. If you would like us to come help your team get up to speed with React Native, either with coaching or training, something like that, I would be more than happy to come personally and help you out. So come talk to me if that's interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Yanni. That's awesome. Has anyone got any questions? Got a microphone here, which is really cool. Throw.
So have you used Titanium Accelerator?
I have seen it used by developers who, at the beginning of the project, had a lot of hair, and then at the end of the project did not have a lot of hair. That's why I'm not personally so eager to try that. But no, I haven't tried it.
Hiya. I wanted to know, how do you interact with designers, like from a prototype on Sketch or Photoshop to a final application using React Native?
So in this particular case, the interaction was about me being here and the designer being here. So that was really good. In the later case that we are now building, the designs are readily shipped from us, for us, by our existing design agency, and there was a InVision prototype, clickable prototype that we're working off of.
And just a second question. Compared to, for example, Ionic Framework, if you heard about it.
I have heard of Ionic, yes.
Or like Bootstrap, having directly a theme with all components normally ready to use, even if they're a bit ugly, but that's not the point. How do you do normally for a React Native application now that you have experience on that? You start to build components for each part of the UI, and after that make like Lego assembly or not?
It's a good question. So in a well-designed user interface, you probably will want to have reusable idioms, UX idioms. So in those cases, yes, you can use in the React component model, you can create these kind of ready building blocks. Because we are a consultancy that doesn't own the IP to our work, we couldn't copy-paste the code from the first project to a second one. But we did kind of like look at it, and then we looked the other way and typed it. So in that sense, yes, a lot of the things we built in the first app, we are doing the exact same things in the second app.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, you mentioned that you had to implement some APIs using Xcode. What about the UI components? I didn't get it if you said. Did you need to apply Xcode and import native components, or they were available?
So the native components that we use are basically kind of like more third-party, not third-party, sorry, like sort of external platform APIs, like the UI image picker, which is like picks the images from camera roll. That integrates just with pure JavaScript. You don't need to write any Objective-C. But what React Native does make possible is that you can nest native view components inside React Native components, and the React Native components inside those views, et cetera, et cetera. And for there, you do have to write some glue to make those components fit together. But it's actually, I don't know any Objective-C. Every time I look at it, I have no idea what's going on. But I managed to integrate some components, and they work, so.
Okay, cool. Cool, any more?
Thanks. when it came to testing the UI, for example, for regression tests and stuff like that, now with Cordova and iOS, you can use Appium, for example. How did you do it for React Native?
Really good question. So basically, there's two levels of testing as always. You have your unit testing, and then you have your kind of like integration or click testing. Unit testing React Native is possible in terms of you can of course test all your application logic, all those things with standard test runners like Jest or Mocha. But testing the React Native views is a bit of a pain. You can do it, but you can only test the virtual view structures created by React Native, and all the components are mocked, so you can't test very deep, etc. Then for the UI testing, we didn't actually do any of this, but the answer is that you use the normal Xcode click testing. Yeah, UI automation stuff. So because the views are purely native, all UI components have a view IDs that React generates for them, so you can actually test and verify that everything works correctly. But we haven't done this because we didn't have an experienced iOS developer on the team. But we are actually starting another project right now that has an iOS developer in the team, and they are surely going to do these kinds of things.
Hello? Oh,
Hi.
there you go. Great talk, mate. Thanks a lot. It was really good. How does it perform on older iOS devices?
Really good question. So basically, the support is iOS 7 and up in terms of operating system, so that already cuts down some of the really, really old devices. But on the other hand, the iOS 7 adoption rate is over 92–93% now, so that's not a huge issue in terms of your user base. Then for the devices that can have iOS 7, the oldest one is iPhone 4S. We have seen some minor performance degradation, but we actually did manage to solve those issues by profiling. We were doing some stupid stuff in not using virtualized list views in some places. So once you figure out those issues, and there's a pretty good profiler actually in the toolset, we got it to perform just fine.
Cheers.
Oh, is it possible to avoid using Objective-C and to only use Swift when working on React Native projects?
Good question. So
Is
I
that
know
a bit greedy?
Yeah, I know next to nothing about this, but I'm going to sound confident when I give the answer. So the React Native template project and the React Native runtime and all those things are written in Objective-C. So my understanding is that the core project needs to be Objective-C. But then my understanding is also, and somebody here in the room can yell, you're wrong, but you can integrate Swift components into Objective-C applications as long as you just do the right thing, whatever that thing is.
You just need a header normally in Objective-C. After that, you can write in Swift.
Thank you for this valuable information.
Great. Any others? No. Good. Thank you very much, Alain.
All right. Hey, before Stu kicks me out, I just wanted to buff just a couple of things. So basically, I'm really excited about the future of React Native, and some of the things I'm really interested about are things that we can do with React Native that are not pure React. So for example, we write our backend for the later application in Clojure. So doing things like OM and Clojure script in React Native is a really, really interesting proposition for us. Here's a project that a colleague of mine, Andre Staltz, who is the author of this framework called Cycle.js, a reactive JavaScript framework. He has a React Native driver for Cycle now, so you can actually do like RX architecture back things, like you can leave the kind of React layer out of it and just do Cycle.js. Another colleague of mine has done this non-production ready thing called Elm Native, where you can use this really cool Haskell-inspired web front-end functional language called Elm on React Native. As you can see, it's not production ready, but both these guys, Andre and Ossi, are the people who are now going to start the third project that we have now, so they're sure to gain a lot more deeper experience on React Native very soon. So something to watch out. Elm Native UI and Cycle on React Native. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.